Nobody identified Johnny Hincapie at the scene, at the subway platform where the mugging and the killing took place. Nobody, in fact, several of the defendants specifically excluded Johnny Hincapie as somebody who was present during that terrible encounter. The evidence against Johnny Hincapie consisted of a member of the Watkins family saying that he looked vaguely familiar, a formulation she had used no fewer than 27 times with various defendants at various times, and of course Johnny Hincapie's own confession, which was elicited through brutality, through intimidation. The confession was coerced, and the confession was false. We know that because of the dogged work of Professor Hughes and Bob Dennison. We'll get to them in just a moment. But there was an 8th person who was charged with that crime, a man by the name of Luis Montero. And Luis Montero was subjected to the same brutality as Johnny Hincapie. And Luis Montero was on the cusp of confessing himself to a crime he did not commit. And when he was ready to finally confess, he was told, sorry, you don't have the opportunity to confess now because the prosecutor has left for the night. And he was returned to a holding cell, but he was charged with the murder and held for a year and a half. Same allegation, he looked vaguely similar, looked vaguely familiar. Ultimately, there was an investigation, and a year and a half later, Luis Montero was exonerated, the charges against him dismissed, and after a year and a half being falsely accused of one of the most horrendous killings in New York, he quietly and calmly left the country. Due to the investigative efforts of Bob Dennison and Bill Hughes, they were able to track down Luis Montero. And Mr. Montero now, who's on the cusp of becoming an American citizen, has given us an affidavit, and that affidavit does 2 things. One, it describes the brutality that was inflicted on Montero that resulted in Montero almost giving a confession to a crime that we know he did not commit. This corroborates Johnny Hincapie's account of what had happened to him and is powerful evidence against the prosecutor's account that the police all acted with due probity and rectitude. The second thing that Montero's affidavit does is Montero was in the subway system that night, but he was not down on the subway platform. He was in the token booth area, and he was actually with Johnny Hincapie when the actual mugging and stabbing took place on the subway platform below. Johnny was never outside of Montero's sight during the time of the mugging and during the time of the stabbing. And Montero can affirmatively state that because of that, there is no way that Johnny Hincapie was involved in this killing. Now, this new evidence is corroborated by old evidence. One of the original defendants, Ricardo Lopez, himself said there were only 6 of us, and he confessed to his own role. He named the others. He did not name Johnny Hincapie, nor did he name Luis Montero, who ultimately was also charged. Anthony Anderson, one of the defendants who acknowledges his own role in the killing, has come forward and issued an affidavit saying, yes, Johnny Hincapie was not one of us, not one of the 6 who planned the mugging, carried out the mugging, and carried out the killing. The other defendants have either refused to come forward or have said they don't remember who was involved, but none of the original defendants claim that Johnny Hincapie played any role whatsoever in this case. He probably would have been acquitted the first time had the trial judge allowed Ricardo Lopez's confession into evidence. The confession tape where he says it was just 6 of us, that evidence was excluded from court. So for all of these reasons, we've come into court now. It's been a very, very long road for Johnny, a very long road for the Hincapie family. And really, the only reason we're here, Ms. Busby and I, who are very proudly representing Johnny on another one of these terrible false confession, wrongful conviction cases, the only reason we're here is through the work of Bob Dennison and Bill Hughes, and I'd like them to come forward and speak briefly and talk about the investigative efforts that led to this filing.
Bob? Okay. Bob and I both met Johnny when he was incarcerated in Sing Sing prison. We listened to his story, and we both believed that he was telling the truth, that he had nothing to do with this crime. So it took us probably 18 months to find Luis Montero, and we finally found him. And he sat down, and we, without any coaching, we just asked him what happened that night. And he just took out a napkin and drew a map of where he was, where Hincapie was. It all added up, it all gelled together. When did this take place? When did you talk to him? This would be 2 years old.
I forget how long it was, but you know, he, as Bill and Ron said, I mean, Luis was in prison for about a year and a half, I think, and then the city, you know, dismissed the case against him, and he never came forward because he was afraid of the police. He was abused when he was in custody. He went back to Colombia. He lost money on a lawsuit that he could have had. Eventually, he did get some money, but and you know, the amazing thing is, when at first he didn't want to talk to us. When I called him up on the phone, he said, "Look, you know, I don't really want to talk." And I said, "Look, if Hincapie is guilty, just tell us, and there's no further conversation." So there was nothing in it for him to talk to us. And finally, he said, "Look, I'd like to see you face to face. I'm not comfortable talking on the phone." So Bill and I went out there, and he's, you know, Montero's a tough guy, but he broke down crying. He broke down crying in Ron and Leah's office too, and you know, and he you know, he's absolutely telling the truth. I mean, I've been involved in the criminal justice system for many years. I've had thousands of parole interviews, and I mean, he really is, in my opinion, telling the truth. And, he's come several times to Ron and Leah's office and told the same story, and you know, he's never been arrested. You know, he's been a good, as Ron said, he's going to become a citizen. Never had any arrests after this, and you know, he's really, in our opinion, very credible. And Bill and I have also spoken to several of the other guys, and as Ron said, nobody puts Johnny on the platform. Nobody.
What about the DA's office? Have they spoken to Mr. Montero?
No. You mean since he got released from custody?
No, since he talked to you guys.
No.
He came forward with this evidence.
No.
Are they aware of the fact?
No.
They're aware of it now. What we decided to do was, we've had, unfortunately, we've had prior experience with the district attorney's conviction integrity unit, and it's been my unhappy experience that that particular unit that reinvestigates these cases is more interested in re-justifying the cases than they are in actually a sincere, independent reinvestigation. So we have not presented Mr. Montero to them. I will say this: the DA's office reinvestigated this case on its own several years ago, but used the same prosecutor, Mr. Shields, who originally prosecuted Hincapie, and to the surprise of absolutely no one, and in violation of all best practices, they concluded that Johnny had been rightfully convicted. But they did not know about, well, they knew Luis Montero was there because they had charged him with second-degree murder growing out of this. But they had not spoken to Montero about what had transpired.
How well did Mr. Montero know Hincapie? Are you sure that this was a company?
He knew Johnny slightly.
He met him a few times before.
Yeah, I mean, the whole large... Oh, gee, I'm sorry.
Actually, he was with him the day of the incident, too.
Right. You know, the whole group of young people that were going out dancing at the Roseland Ballroom, there were like 60 or 70 in the whole group, at least it was way. And you know, I think probably all of them knew somebody who knew somebody, but only 6 of them were actually involved in the mugging plot robbery.
Which cops were involved in the coerced confession, and what exactly did they do?
Leah?
Detective Ronald Casey was the detective, and specifically to Johnny. Johnny states that Detective Casey told him what the story was that he could memorize. Blew smoke in his face, used physical abuse, shoved him, pulled his hair, screamed at him, and told him exactly what to memorize. And then another detective was called in, and the story was written down.
How long was he in there with them for?
I'm not sure the exact amount of time he was in there.
Detective Casey been involved in any other suspicious cases? Is this the first appeal of the conviction?
No, the conviction was originally appealed when Johnny was convicted. The conviction was affirmed. You know, the major basis for appeal was the Ricardo Lopez tape should have come into evidence because that exonerated Johnny, and the court held that, well, it was inculpatory. It was a declaration against penal interest as to Ricardo Lopez. When Ricardo said, yeah, I was involved in the mugging, but it was not a declaration against penal interest when he said, there were only 6 of us, and here they are. So Judge Torres, actually, who's retired, did not allow that into evidence.
But this is like the first 440 or the first
The
habeas?
first 440, the first time we've come forward with this evidence, and again, it's evidence that Bill and Bob have been working on, you know, for quite some period of time.
Has anyone been in touch with from your group, been in touch with the Watkins family about this recently?
I interviewed the Watkins family a couple of years ago. Since Mr. Watkins has since passed away, and the Watkins family position is that well, those boys all confessed, and I said to them, do you have it? You know, can you possibly conceive the fact that people do confess falsely to crimes? I mean, we have mounting evidence, you know, to back that up, and they weren't too open to that suggestion.
I mean, look, I think we've all of us on this side and many of us in the press corps have been around these cases in New York for long enough to know that there are a number of wrongful conviction, bad confession cases that came out of overzealous law enforcement during the crack epidemic in the 1980s and early 1990s. There were 3 times the number of murders, half the number of cops, and if mistakes were going to be made, the cops were going to err on the side of sweeping up too many people rather than sweeping up too few. And I think we've finally gotten to the point in our city's history where we can begin to look back on this as history and begin to rectify some of the injustices that were done in the name of law and order a generation ago.
If you're right, he's innocent. How long has he been in jail? How old is he now? Where is he?
41 now. He's been in since he was 18.
23 plus.
23 plus.
Fishkill?
He's, of course, you know, he's a model inmate. He participates extensively with a prisoners' arts and theatrical group. Some of
Brent's.
Yeah.
Brent taught him, right?
Yeah, I taught him since 2003, and he's a great guy.
He's really such a positive guy. I mean, a lot of guys, Johnny was, is falsely convicted according to how we strongly feel, and he's not bitter. He's just very positive, very special guy. I've spoken to a lot of inmates who know him, and he really helps a lot of inmates in prison. He's just, and as Ron brought out, the city, in the headlines of the Post, I think you brought it out too, but the way they rounded up these guys so quickly, because the headlines read, Dave, do something. Because after the Bryant Watkins murder, the city was, a little bit crazy, and they just rushed to grab whoever they could.
And the Watkins murder, just for historical context, occurred 2 weeks after the first set of convictions in the Central Park 5 case, and there were some detectives involved in that case questioning the suspects in the Watkins case.
But which detectives?
I don't know.
Gonzalez, who's currently, I think he's one of the current defendants in the Central Park jogger case.
Well, that's the other case that comes to mind,
right.
Because those were coerced confessions as well. It's a similar, like, wolf pack thing, right? We used to talk about wolf packs back then.
Right. I mean, these are the sort of 2 cases that in many ways bookended the difficulties and tragedies of the criminal justice system and public safety. All of those convicted in the Central Park jogger case confessed. All of them confessed. All of them were convicted. All of them were completely innocent. Here, there were a number of confessions that were made by defendants, and those defendants are not challenging their guilt. It's not as though every confession that was ever given was a false confession, but there's a substantial number of confessions that were given that were coerced. And some of those coerced confessions were true, and some of those coerced confessions were false.
And in New York State,
sorry, no, go ahead, Lon.
In New York State, 50% of the wrongful convictions that have been overturned involve a false confession. Nationally, it's 25%. and approximately 50% of all murder wrongful convictions nationally involve a false confession.
I think those of us who were around during that time in the 80s and 90s know that the police regularly used improper and coercive techniques to extract confessions. Prosecutors regularly had those officers deny their misconduct, and judges regularly acted as though they believed the police officers, even though we all knew what was going on. In many of those cases, the defendants confessed truthfully, although under coercion. But when you're coercing confessions, you get a lot of false confessions as well.
Does anybody from the family want to say anything about this?
Al?
Please.
Alex?
Alex?
Brent?
This is Johnny's brother, Alex.
How you doing?
Johnny's father.
I just want to
Please, go forward.
We're just all very happy that the truth is finally coming out, and a lot of people, it's been a struggle with the help of Bob, Bill, Ron, Leah, everybody, and just everybody who's been supporting us. I just want to say thank you very much.
Yeah, it's grateful to be here today. Thanks to Mr. Kuby, thanks to Bob Francis, Nabil Hughes, and all the friends that have been around us. It's great to be here, hoping that this new step is going to finally be the freedom of Yanni.
Tell us a little bit about what he was like as an 18-year-old. What was going on in his life at the time?
He was a great kid, full of joy, love for his family. It has been not only when he grew up, but also now, all these 23 years, he has never changed. He has been the same Johnny, full of great hopes and full of love for all human beings and for his parents, for his family. He has been supporting us from prison, helping us to keep living, keep believing, and especially, I am so proud of being his mother. He has never let us down.
He's been a great, great man. He has been participating in every educational program, and he just got the master about 2 years ago. Now he's looking for his doctor's degree. He is a model. People that knows him, they love him. Okay?
I also want to take this opportunity to thank Kuby, Mr. Kuby, Leah.
Right behind you. You knew somebody was behind you.
Leah and Bob Tennyson, Bill, and all our wonderful friends. All the people from the RTA, which I love. And God bless America. God bless America. Because I came to this country believing that this is the greatest place of all. And I really thank God that I'm here among all of you. And I hope that this story will be read so nobody will go through what we have been going through. And this would never happen again to no one. Thank you.
He's coming home. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Kuby. Thanks, Bob. Thank you. All of you that have been supporting us.
And at the same time, I want to say something too. I sympathize in these 23 years for the Watkins family. They have been in our heart every single day, every Christmas, every holidays, every day actually, because as a mother, I am close to her. Thank you.
Where are you all